show this morning. Indeed, we are looking at education. Specifically, it is no longer news that the Joint Admission and Matriculations Board recently just reviewed the cut-off point for admission into tertiary institutions. Right now, we hear that it is 120. What does all of that pertain to country's education system? We'll be looking at that and a whole lot more, plus the return of post-UTME on the show this morning. But first of all, we'll take reactions from Nigerian parents, lecturers, and students as regards the new 120 cut-off point for JAM. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The news that the Joint Matriculation and Admissions Board, JAM, has released a new set of cut-off marks for students seeking admission into the country's higher institutions of learning has generated mixed reactions. A cross-section of lecturers, parents and students alike have however criticized the reduction of the cut-off point to 120. In recent years, the Nigerian educational system has come under much criticism as a result of many unemployed graduates who many say are not employable. As a result of these agitations for a dynamic educational policy in Nigeria, the Joint Admission Matriculation Board, JAM, reduced its cut-off mark to 120 after a meeting with vice-chancellors, rectors and provosts of higher institutions, a move which the examination body claimed was not to lower academic standard but give room for flexibility. The examination body has been criticized for the 2017/2018 academic section. Speaking with Galaxy News, a lecturer from the Department of History and Strategic Studies, University of Lagos, Dr. Henry Ogunjewu, allayed fears that this move by JAM would only mar the educational system.
JAM, as an institution, is trying to price itself out of relevance. It will get to a time that you just discover that JAM is no longer relevant to the educational system. That's number one. Number two, I think that they're just trying to make money for the universities. I can assure you that University of Lagos will never reduce their cutoff mark less than, they will never take anybody less than 200. And that means that no matter what JAM says, the University of Lagos will still maintain our own standard as 200 and above. Even with the 200 cutoff mark, we already have more than enough students. So why look for somebody who is less qualified to get into university? Other universities may try that, polytechnics and all that. So they will make more money for universities because instead of having 1,000 people write post-JAM, you find out that many, many more will just write post-JAM. At the end of the day, they just throw them off like that. So it's not really good for the system. It's not good for the educational career profile of the country as well. And it's already demeaning our integrity in the international system.
However, some parents and students who spoke also condemned JAM for slashing the cut-off mark.
I felt very bad because I could remember when we were gaining admission into our institution, we need to read hard, we need to study hard, and just putting the cut-off mark down to 120, I don't think that's the best for our educational system.
Actually, I see it as discouraging the children from reading, because if the cut-off can be brought down so low, then what's the essence putting in effort? That's what I see about it. And I want the JAM to equally look into it. Why would they reduce? They should let the masses know what happened. Is it that they didn't pass well? And even if they did not pass well, 120 is just too low.
Basically on three people that are involved: JAM, the student, and the university. From the perspective of JAM is looking at it that there are so many brilliant students who, because of the exigency of that moment, were not able to make up to 200 points. And for that reason, they want to create a level playing ground for just students to be brought in and given another opportunity to write. But if these students are made up to 120 and were not able to make up to 200 points.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Education, Adamu, has formally lifted the ban placed on universities from conducting post-UTME examinations.
All right, welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Galaxy today, and we are specifically talking about UTME, post-UTME, and all the matters arising therefrom. And we have guests here with us in the studio.
All right, joining us here in Lagos, we have an education researcher, and also he's been on the show a couple of times, Dr. Peter Ogundoro. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you indeed for joining us on the program today.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go straight into topic for today. Now, the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board JAMB has described, let me quote, as unnecessary the controversies over the reduction of cutoff marks for admission into tertiary institutions. Do you also share this opinion? Do you think all of this talk is really unnecessary and what they've done is okay?
Well, if I were in their shoes, I probably would not have used that expression. But there may be some things they know which they have not told us, which may be the basis for them to describe the reactions they are getting as unnecessary. The question is, who do we blame? JAMB should take responsibility. If we live in a country where people take responsibility for their actions, you can't blame the masses who do not understand why you should be saying that a student who scores 30% in an exam should be allowed to get into a higher institution, into the university, when we haven't seen it that low before. Okay, so there are a lot of things that they know which the average person in the streets does not know, which is the reason why they have expressed it that way. So probably as we progress, I might attempt to help you to understand what some of those issues are.
Okay, fine, because we still expect to hear from the head of media and information of the Joint Admission and Matriculations Board from Abuja. Okay, but then still waiting, while we wait for them to get on the show, what I really don't understand, what would you think would be the reason? What would you adduce to it? I mean, before now, it used to be you have to score over 250, 300 to gain admission to study medicine, law, and all other high courses in the school. But right now, from 180, they are seemingly dropping it further down to 120. What is it that the exams are now harder, or students no longer study well? What could be the reason, really?
It's a complicated matter, and you have to be a researcher in the industry to understand the undercurrents that impinge upon the issues we are discussing. For a start, I understand that this year, not more than about 1/3 of those who wrote the exam scored up to 200. And so if you probably insist that only those who score 200 and above can get into the university, a good number of bright students who probably, as a result of tension at the point they were writing the exam or lack of skill to write the exam, may not be able to score up to that. You'll be denying them of the opportunity to get into the university. And that, in that situation, issues of equity, fairness, and justice arises. We have discussed the issue of CBT over and over. You should know that that you do better than me in an exam is not necessarily proof that you are better than me. That's the truth of it, because there are several factors that impinge upon that. The average Nigerian student is not attending a secondary school where we use computer to teach him. So he finishes 6 years in a secondary school where he never used computer to learn. And then at the point he is trying to get into university, you insist that he has to use computer to write entrance examination. We shouldn't expect very good performance from people who come from rural communities. For example, people who live in the far north, in some of these places where we're having crisis, and in states where education is not well funded. You should know that one of the reasons why the federal government has refused, for example, to make computer studies compulsory at secondary school level is the fact that their own schools do not have computers with which they are training the children. So, but in a modern society, every child who is passing through a secondary school should be trained with computer, and you should make computer science, computer studies very an absolute necessity, so that we can acquire the skills that will enable our children to become globally competitive. At the moment, we are not globally competitive. And no matter what argument you have, the truth we know is that we live in a world where you can't hide anymore. So when you say 30% can get into the university, everybody in the world hears that. Universities abroad are hearing that. And you are putting Nigerian students who want to go for further studies abroad at a disadvantage. Because universities, especially the world-class university, the best university in the world, may not want to accept people coming from Nigeria, because the assumption is that they have not passed through a system that would have prepared them for the kind of training that they are going to give them when they join them over there. That's one. Now, beyond that, you should know that as we speak today, National Universities Commission is insisting that they are going to license more and more private universities to also come in to enhance access to university, to tertiary education in Nigeria. And they are doing that. I hear even in the next 1 or 2 years, about 200 more universities will be, private universities will be brought into existence. Okay? Now, we know that, for example, for last year, not more than about 10 to 15,000 students who wrote that exam showed interest in going to private universities. And that the reason should not be difficult for us to understand. We live in an economy that is completely down. Parents don't have money to send their children to private universities. So the private universities are, other things being equal, likely to be operating undercover, motivating the people who run the system to lower this cutoff point so that they can recruit from that lower margin without offending the policies of the government. You will never hear anybody say this on air because it will be apolitical for you to speak like that. So that is also important. Then there is a possibility that those who think that they have the privilege to represent their tribes within the education system may be using this kind of platform to also give advantage to the people who come from the places where they come from to ensure that they are able to get into schools that are run with federal resources. You will also never hear anybody say this on air because it will not be politically correct for you to state that. So these are undercurrents that not everybody can see, but they are all there playing, and we cannot ignore them.
All right, Dr. Ogundoro, while I share some of your sentiments and I agree to some extent to what you've said, but then in every examination there's got to be a reasonable benchmark.
Yes.
And JAMB has so far been able to uphold that for a bit. This is the lowest we have come, since I knew what JAMB is and all of that. Now let's look at how detrimental really this can be for the students themselves, having to go write JAMB and then the cutoff point is 120. Doesn't it seem ridiculous enough?
Yeah, it may seem ridiculous, but I want to emphasize the fact that you scored 120. It's not necessarily proof that you are inferior to the person who scored 180 last year.
But does it mean that you passed?
Yes, in some, as a matter of fact, in some societies, you don't run entrance examination to get into the university. In England, for most universities in England, over 80% of them, you don't run entrance exam to get in there. All you need to have is to have passed through your secondary school successfully and probably write A-levels, and you have the minimum number of credits that universities require.
But then writing JAMB supposed to be like a test of all of the 5-6 years you've put into secondary school before
it is supposed to be. The reason why we need JAMB at all and why we even need post-JAMB is because we have more people seeking university admission than we have spaces for.
Okay, so it is like a check.
It's a way to distribute spaces available without putting some people at a disadvantage. So we say, let us make it merit-based. But it does not necessarily mean that the person who doesn't get in cannot benefit from university education if you give him the opportunity. Do you understand? Because for every one person who gets in through this system, you probably have as many as 8 who will not get in. Even when they have the capacity to benefit from university education because we don't have enough spaces.
Let me put in one quick question before we go to our outstation. Don't you think this might encourage a lackadaisical attitude in the reading culture that is already, on the poor side, for the students?
That's a possibility, but the student who relaxes because he has heard that he can get in with 120 is acting out of ignorance, because there are a number of factors he does not understand that account for this low mark. I have told you, for example, a major factor, which I've emphasized on this show and some other shows have appeared on in this country, is the fact that people are writing exams using computer they do not understand. Okay? So you will discover that if we were doing pencil and paper exam, the person who scores 120 probably could go as far as 120. He is writing exam with computer for the first time in his life. There's the idea of you need only 8 buttons to write the exam, and therefore everybody should succeed with it. It doesn't. There's no scientific evidence that backs that up. Any child who comes from a village and competes with my son, who has been using computer from kindergarten. There's no way, even if you are smarter than my son will beat you in an examination.
All right,
so those
Dr.
factors are there.
All right, let us go to Abuja. Let us hear for the board itself. We are being joined by Fabian Benjamin. He's the head of Media and Information, Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, and he joins us live from Abuja. Good morning to you, Mr. Benjamin. We are looking at the fallout of the UTME, specifically the reduction in quarter point to 120. For people who don't understand, can you actually explain the rationale behind this new trend?
I want to make one observation or a point. I want to make something clear here. The 120 cutoff mark is not a JAM decision. It is a stakeholders decision because the whole thing, everywhere, commentaries are being, fingers are pointed at JAM lowered marks and stuff like that. All stakeholders at that meeting, vice chancellors, provosts, rectors with their registrar agreed that let us have a benchmark. Having said that, I want to say that why that was done, first is to take back to the institution the power of admission. We, over time, have taken all the powers of admission from the tertiary institution. The Senate of the University, the Academic Board of Polytechnics and College Education have the power as defined in their various law, and in the various law establishing them to do admission. And what we did was to take this power back to them. It will also be wrong for people to begin to say that before the program commences, there was a clip from Lagos where a doctor 120. We are not saying that institutions should admit people with 120. What we are saying is that, look, go pick the best you can pick. Give us a template. Give us your cutoff marks that you want to do admission. If you say your cutoff mark is 200, good and fine. If you say 250, good and fine. But in a situation whereby an institution, because of its peculiarity in the sense that number of candidates that apply to that institution, its location, and so many other factors, don't have candidates that score far above that mark, can make do with something within that region. It is not really a decision. For this year admission, we don't have a national cutoff point because institutions are determining their cutoff point. So you cannot have a national cutoff point where everybody is determining whatever is his own cutoff point. But in order to avoid abuses, we decided that no, for whatever reason, no institution should go below this particular mark. Let me give you an example. The standard that Nigerians are talking about, that 180, it used to be 180 and stuff like that. Institutions, the speaker there, I like the way he said there are certain things maybe comply with the 180 cutoff marks that we've been having over time. They go behind, under the table, through the back door, admit candidates who score even below the 120 we're talking about today. Some never even wrote JAM. And then after they graduate, they send them to us for regularization. As a matter of fact, every day we receive requests about 2,000 candidates for regularization. Every day. Regularization simply means admission that we are done. Yet we cannot fill them. For the past 4, 5, 6 years, no institution in Nigeria can beat its chest and say it has done admission up to 80% of its carrying capacity. Carrying capacity means of the space available in that institution because of some of these stringent conditions. Today, if you want to read Hausa in Nigerian University, you must have. Whereas if you go to London, all you need is a credit in Hausa and English. You don't have anything to do with mathematics. Those are some of the stringent conditions that we're trying to look at. What will a person that wants to read Hausa do with mathematics? But that is the law on ground. So many Nigerians are out there studying in Mushroom University. You need to go to places like Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, Gambia to see the kind of institution that Nigerians are attending. And when they come back, nobody talks about that.
Okay.
All right, we'll still try and reconnect with Abuja in the course of the program. We seem to be having a bit of a connectivity issue. Mr. Fabian Benjamin is joining us right again. Stay with us.
You may have 120, yes, but they will still have to admit from top down to the bottom.
Mr. Fabian Benjamin is joining us right again. Mr. Fabian. Go ahead, Mr. Fabian.
So we're not saying that once you have 120, then you must go to a university. Once you have 120, no. You let university be known by the standard they want to establish. Let every university bear its name. Because what we are saying is that, look, let us enhance, let us create engender competition among the tertiary institutions. So that over a period of time, institution will be known by the kind of standard, the kind of product. If you decide to be admitting people that are not well, nurtured, after a period of time, the labor market will not accept them, and people will know that, look, I don't want my... Why?
All right, let us continue with Lagos for a while. We'll try and return to Abuja in the course of the show.
All right, Dr. Ogundoro, you heard what Mr. Fabian was trying to say there. Now, my question is, this new policy by JAM, how will it actually solve, the many problems we have regarding tertiary education in Nigeria?
Well, access to higher education is just one of the things, issues in higher education management. Is not the only thing. So the JAMB is not pretending to have all the answers that can move us beyond where we are, especially when we start looking at quality of education. But of course, when you look at quality of education, the quality of intake is the people you recruit to come and benefit from it. It has a lot to do with the quality of the output.
Exactly.
If poor quality people come into the system, it becomes difficult for you to help them, to the level where they can become globally competitive. So that is why what we are discussing becomes very relevant. And I think that the people in JAM probably understand this. But again, you see, they are operating within a socio-political milieu that makes it difficult for them in some cases to do as much as they have the capacity to do. Because they are not the only ones who are the stakeholders in this matter, just as I mentioned to you. There are private universities who have people in high places in government who also press buttons to get what they want. And there are parents and university lecturers, university administrators, and ordinary people, even investors from abroad who want to come and take advantage of, this unholy system that we have here. But by way of summary, what he has made clear, I hope I'll be able to help him to underscore it, is that they are allowing room for flexibility, that don't go below 120. But they are not saying that if you score 120, you automatically have access to university. Okay? Remember, in the same situation where they're saying is 120, they're also saying we are giving the universities back their power to choose who they think is the person they want to work with as a student. That means that they can now go back to conducting post-UTME, where probably people who scored 200 and above or 150 and above, depending on the university, can now come and compete again for available spaces. But the question somebody may ask is, why do we have to write 2 exams to get into one institution? It's either JAMB is doing the job and doing it well, and we use the result they're giving us to choose students, or JAMB is not there, and we're using what universities can do for themselves to get students into the system. Okay? So there's probably suspicion that there is validity problem with respect to the exams that JAMB conducts. And it's not just suspicion. That's what universities say. And that's why they are insisting on post-UTME.
Okay.
And I think the Minister of Education has recently said the reason why they reversed it is because they have come to know some things they didn't know before. I do not know what those things are, which is why it has informed the decision to reverse the position that no more UTME. Okay, because universities have in the past 1 year been very angry with the Ministry of Education for insisting that they cannot conduct their own exam, because at the end of the day they should take responsibility for the quality of products they give society. So if you compare them to take people who are not qualified to belong to the places they run, and then when they finish, you blame them for the quality that they are giving society, that it will not be fair. So they want to be able to determine who comes in and who does not come in. So that's probably what they're trying to say. But at the end of the day, I know, Ibadan, for example, has said minimum for people who can even do post-UTME is 200. Unilag, we just had it now, is 200.
Yeah.
So no one is being compared, but for the private universities, only a few, maybe 2-3 of them will insist on 200. Most of them will be happy with 220 because the average parent does not have money to send his or her child to that kind of place. So the way to get students who are unwilling to come there is to tell them that since you can't get into any federal university, any state university, you better come here, because if we take you with your 130, we wouldn't have offended any law. But nobody will say this on air because it will not be politically correct for you to say so.
Wow. All right, let's go back to Abuja for a bit again. Mr. Fabian Benjamin, who is head of media and information for JAMB, is still on standby. Now, I'm thinking we should have a more holistic approach, you know, in dealing with matters regarding education. Now, where I know JAMB is typically, you know, for admissions into tertiary institution and all of that, but I'm still asking, how does this decision help that average child in that rural village there who wants to acquire tertiary education? That rural village there who wants to acquire tertiary education?
Well, rightly.
All right, I think we're still experiencing a bit of a network hitch there. Let's take a quick break. All right, we're back. Okay, go ahead.
Let tertiary institution determine who to admit. And let me make this correction.
Let's take a quick break.
Wow.
All right. Okay,
They're not getting me. Hello. Hello. And one correction I want to make is this. When they are inviting these candidates for post-UTME, they will only invite candidates that have scored from the cutoff point they've determined as their own cutoff point for 2017 admission. We've designed a system, a software we call CAPS. And in CAPS, because we want to ensure that these policies, these privileges are not abused, in CAPS, every institution will key in what is its carrying cutoff point. And one
Okay, I think we need to take that quick break now. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. Stay with us.
The state of the nation's economy leaves much to be desired. Nigerians grapple with one sort of issue to the other on a daily basis. Sometimes the arguments get heated. Tempers even flare.
There is a high level of unemployment and poverty in the land.
Military do not come and bomb villages of innocent people.
His action is coming very late because we asked the legislature, to reduce your salaries. Perhaps some of them should even say by half.
On Galaxy today, we'll take a no-holds-barred approach to issues and trends. We bring prominent Nigerians from all walks of life to bear their mind on human angle stories. Join us on Galaxy today. Galaxy today, discussing issues as they trend.
Welcome back. It's still Galaxy today, and we're looking at the recent development with the cutoff mark for admissions into Nigeria's tertiary institutions. Still with us in our Lagos studio is Dr. Peter Obidoro. He is an education researcher. Before we took that break, we were talking to our guest who is in Abuja, but we seem to be having some network hitch. Let's see if we can go back and continue. Mr. Fabian, if you can hear me, let's hear your take on how this recent policy by JAMB will help the average Nigerian student. On how this recent policy by JAMB will help the average Nigerian student.
Yes, I was explaining this, the checks that we've put in place to ensure that this policy or this freedom is not abused. I spoke about the CAP system, that the Central Admission Processing System, and I was telling you that each institution will determine its own benchmark. And once you give us that benchmark, you cannot change the post in the middle of the game. And one good thing we've done with this year admission is that candidates can track their admission in such a way that if I apply to University of Lagos to read medicine, for instance, and I score 200, a candidate is admitted with a score less than what I have scored, I will query the system, and immediately JAMB will come in and play the regulatory role that we are supposed to play. We will find out why is this candidate not picked, why is somebody with less score picked, why is it dropped and somebody else and stuff like that. So these are the checks and balances. And just as I was explaining earlier, you see, you cannot build a nation on the basis of falsehood. Nigeria, I know, would have appreciated a situation whereby we just come from out of the stakeholder meeting and say, 2017 cutoff point is 200, and everybody will now clap and say the standard is going up. You don't push a standard that way. What we've done is to define the realistic to say, okay, this is where we've been. This is the truth. Yes, we've been declaring 180, 180 year in, year out, but this is the actual situation on ground. And the registrar said, look, he's not afraid, he's not deterred, he will continue to say the truth the way it is and ensure that, because if you don't say the truth, planners, policy makers will always get things wrong. Now we've stated the truth. We are taking off from the actual position that Nigerian education is, and we'll move from there. One, we're hopeful that the kind of competition that we want to bring into the system, it will bring out the best of our tertiary institutions. Does not mean that the standard is going down, not at all, because a 120 candidate may never find himself in an institution where they have multitude of people scoring 200 and above. He may only find himself in a situation whereby
all right, we apologize. That's as much as we can take from our end in Abuja. Many thanks to Fabian Benjamin, Head of Media and Information, Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board. We'll be going to Ibadan in a couple of minutes.
All right, Doctor, let's look at the Nigerian university system and the kind of esteem it has in the larger society, talking in terms of quality of graduates that come out of our university system. Now, a little deviation from the issue of JAMB cutoff and all of that. How do you think we can actually make policies, that would have a multiplier effect in a positive way on the larger society in terms of quality of students that come out of the universities?
Well, I have been in this industry for about 30 years. I have been privileged to study in some of the best institutions around the world. I've done research in the Scandinavian countries. I have studied in Oxford, in Cambridge, all over the place. And I have gone, to here and there, getting statistics and understanding how countries have been able to move beyond this level where we are. We must underscore the fact that you cannot fix the Nigerian economy, you cannot fix our politics, you cannot fix our social problems if you don't get it right with education. Okay? Now, for you to get it right with education, you must be holistic in the way you address it. Because those of us who study education, we talk about school and society. School operates within society. And society has to help school to be able to serve society well. As we speak today, society is not healthy. And so it will be unrealistic for you to expect school to be healthy. Okay? For example, politicians in Abuja, for instance, those in parliament, what are they there for? They make policies that help them first and foremost as individuals and their families and the tribes they come from, the states, their states of origin. You can't run a good system and get good quality products from our education system if that is the way our brain is working. The funding level of our education system is nothing to write home about. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we are a poor country. We always pretend that we are rich. We are not. Facebook, for example, their first quarter turnover for this year, if you convert it to Naira, is over 3 trillion Naira. Our entire federal budget for this year is about 7 trillion. Okay? The money Facebook, just one organization started by a young man who was about 25 years at the time, about 32 years now, started by a young man. Their turnover in the net for only the first half of this year can fund our federal budget. That's just one institution. That tells you how poor we are. Microsoft can fund our federal budget for 100 years using their network. That tells you how poor we are. So if you go abroad, you know, and take Harvard, for example. If you go to like you have 35,000 students. The Harvard you hear about, they do not have up to 23,000 students. But Harvard's net worth is much bigger than the net worth of Lagos state government.
All right.
How do you start competing, okay? And then the teachers, the skills they have, you need to get into where education, you know, is understood to be the bedrock of development.
Yeah.
And you see what people are doing, okay? I also did my undergraduate program here before I traveled abroad. But I can tell you that if you spend 7 days in England, in a typical world-class university, it will be much more than the education you get in a typical Nigerian university today in 4 years. And I'm not exaggerating it. That's my industry. I do research there on a daily basis. I have spent the last 3 years, for example, researching on all these issues of JAM, access, funding, and we have been able to get ideas regarding how we can put a stop to all these challenges we have. But unfortunately, the people who are benefiting from this unholy system will not want to consult those who have information on how we can make
Okay, Dr. Ogudo, we'll come back to you. Let us bring Ibadan into this conversation. Honorable Sheung Adeline is standing by. Good morning to you. We just spoke with Head of Media and Information of Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, and he underscored that the new policy is not just a thing of JAMB alone, that stakeholders in the education sector actually came together to come to that cutoff point. The question I really want to ask is, with all of these issues here and there, reduction of quota point and all of that, do you think we still need JAMB to conduct entrance into tertiary institutions in Nigeria?
Thank you. Sincerely speaking, from my own side, I think JAMB has outlived its relevance over time, because in other salient climb, you don't have a joint board to conduct an entrance examinations into tertiary institutions. But having said that, yes, JAMB, I passed through JAMB myself, and JAMB has been on for a very long time. But talking about 120 cutoff mark out of 400, 120 is 30%. That is F9. And, it's going to affect the reputations of our graduates elsewhere. For example, General Medical Council of United Kingdom has banned graduates from about 9 universities in Nigeria from obtained licenses in United Kingdom. That is rather sad. And you can see that, our universities was unable to make the first 1,000 in the ranking of universities in 2016, until recently, that only UI, University of Ibadan, made the first 10 in Africa. We were not even there a couple of years back. That is rather sad. That means, because, smart nations have smart citizens, citizens that are well educated. Education is about the only legacy. Now, we cannot, because of poor infrastructure in education and because of lack of adequate investment in education, come up with the excuse, of rubbishing all these institutions. It is not done. I don't subscribe to it. I think 120 is rather ridiculous, because all these graduates, they are still going out to compete. How do you expect somebody, that is using 120 F9, I call it F9 because it's a fail, as an entry point to compete with all other people from all other clime? It is worrisome. Take, for example, University of Lagos. Now they are saying UTME, the ban on it has been lifted. Now, UNILAG has a capacity of taking about 3,000 to 5,000. About almost 30,000 students are applying to UNILAG every year. Do they have the capacity? If we are talking about 120 as benchmark, you understand? Will UNILAG have the capacity to conduct UTME, post-UTME, for students of about 10,000? Where are they going to use? Where is the infrastructures? So there are, there are issues. And I think the area they ought to have looked at is this awaiting results sitting for JAMB. I think, there has to be a law, or they should fine-tune it in such a way that if you don't have your required 5 credits, don't sit for JAMB. I think it starts from there. And 120 is rather ridiculous, my opinion.
The spokesperson for JAMB, whom we spoke with in Abuja, said placing the benchmark for admissions into university at 120 doesn't mean that the institutions themselves should actually comply with that. It's just to say you can't go below that point. But having said that, another reason why they have done this is to allow for inclusion in the education system, especially for students that come from disadvantaged states, to put it that way. Don't you think that is a meaningful consideration at all? Let's give a chance to everybody to acquire a university education and then see if we'll be better for it.
I think rather than do that, the government should be bold enough and have interest to invest more in educational infrastructures, rather than say 120 is being pegged, so that to allow for more people to come in. Because take, for example, South Korea is investing about 65% of its annual budget, right from 1990 up to date, on education. And the result of that has shown. Now, South Korea happened to be the 5th largest economy in Asia, the 10th largest economy in the world. Education goes around almost every facet of life. We are having about 152 tertiary institutions. If they are in short supply, government should invest more. Now, we are not investing up to 40 or 50% of our budget, even, let's say, small budgets, on education. But education should be the bedrock of everything, rather than for government to lower, or JAMB to lower the benchmark. You understand? I think to invest more should have been the way out, not to lower the standard, because our graduates are still going to compete with other people from other climes. So that's the way I feel about it.
Now let's leave UTME for a bit, and let's talk about post-UTME right now. We all know that there is now a comeback for the post-UTME after it had been trailed. Lots of reactions and counter-reactions from parents, students, and even some university lecturers, although most people said it was an avenue for the universities to make money to enrich themselves. But in your opinion, do you really think the return of the post-UTME is actually going to do the education system any good?
Well, I just said it now, that let's take, for example, University of Lagos. Now, let's say University of Lagos has a capacity of taking about 3,000 to 5,000 students. I don't think they have more capacity than that. Now, and about 30 or 40,000 are applying to UNILAG. Now, by lowering to 120, they will have more people to sit for their post-UTME, because the benchmark has been lowered. Now, where are they going to come up? Even let's say, now JAMB is collecting about 5,000. Let's say UNILAG is collecting about 3,000. Even with 3,000 from all these people, because the benchmark has been lowered to 120, where are they going to get the infrastructures to do the exam post-UTME for them? So it's like creating another problem, logjam, for the universities, even for post-UTME. That's where the problem lies.
We'll come back to you in a bit. Let Dr. Ogudo react to that comment.
Well, there's a problem here, and I think that the people who run JAM have not understood it. I'm a researcher in attitude. You may be saying something and think people are hearing you just because they are watching you speak, and you think they're understanding what you're saying, but they are not getting any word at all. That is the problem here. JAM has not said that for post-UTME, anybody who scores 120 and above must be brought in to write the post-UTME. That's not what they're saying. They are allowing the universities to exercise their autonomy. In other words, a university can choose, depending on the demand for spaces available to them, to make minimum score for people to come and write post-UTME 250, and JAM will not have any problem with that. Where JAM will have a problem is if you say their cutoff is 250, they eventually discover that you admitted people who scored 230. It means you have done that admission through the back door, because some people are using their advantages and privileges in society to get into the system, which has been happening over the years. So you can't blame JAM for that. That's how the system has worked over the years. Okay? So people are not understanding what JAM is saying. And I cannot blame the people who don't understand. It must be JAM that we have to go back to. They need to probably network with people who understand how to communicate with the average Nigerian parent, the average Nigerian student, the average Nigerian educator and academic, so that they can understand the point that is being made. They are only allowing for flexibility. I will nail it by mentioning to you that UNILAG, for example, annually we have minimum 80,000 candidates aspiring to get in there. The spaces available at UNILAG will not normally be more than 8,000, and you have 80,000 applying to get in there. You go to a university in Bauchi, you don't have more than 3,000 people in all who have applied in all the faculties aspiring to get in there. So the cutoff for Bauchi cannot be 250, because if you make it 250, nobody will be able to study there. Exactly. So UNILAG can have 200, whereas Bauchi can have 120, so that they will be able to have students, to spend the federal budget allocated to them on. That's what JAM is saying. But people are not getting it. So the more we say this, the more we actually bastardize the image of our country. I have mentioned to you earlier that it is also a wrong notion for us to assume that because somebody failed UTME, that the person is incapable of benefiting from university education. Because there are many countries in the world where you don't write an entrance exam to get into the university. In England, the average university there's no entrance exam. They have a body similar to JAM, but their business is not to conduct entrance examination. It's for you to submit your result, IGCSE, and then if you have done A-level, you bring everything to them and they look at it and they present it to the universities who own the system, and then they select from that pool, making sure that they respect principles of equity, fairness, and justice, and understanding the need to admit only the number that the government can cope with in terms of funding, and also reflecting human resources needs of society in the different sectors of the economy. These are issues that are a bit complicated for the average person in the street to understand. Unfortunately, JAM assumes that because somebody is a university professor, he will understand this. And so it's even unnecessary for professors to man, the restroom, and they are complaining about 120, because they are deceiving people who are less privileged than themselves. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. JAM hasn't said that it's automatic that if you score. So it would be wrong for anybody to hear tomorrow that UNILAG has conducted post-UTME, and he says, I scored 180. JAM said it was 120. Why didn't you invite me? That's not what JAM is saying.
I'm happy you clarified this point, because to the average student there, what they understand is the fact that I scored 120 automatically, I must get an admission into the university.
Private universities can do 125. UNILAG can do 220. There's no problem with that.
So it's according to the peculiarities of the school.
It has to do with the dynamics of demand and supply. If the demand for spaces available in your university is very high, then you can move it up.
Would this bring disparity, in the quality of graduates,
definitely. There's disparity everywhere in the world. The quality of education you get in Oxford is not the quality of university you get in Manchester. The quality of university of education you get in Pennsylvania and Harvard and Yale certainly it's not the same thing you get from the typical state university in America.
So, but the good side.
You leave it in the hands of the employer to select. All we need to do is to run a system that gives everybody a level playing ground. When we make it clear, okay, along the lines we are trying to emphasize, employers will be the ones driving universities in Nigeria to up their game.
Okay.
When it becomes obvious that 90% of your products as a university, 10 years after they have left university, they have not got the kind of jobs that are meant for graduates. Nobody will
the good side to this is that this will sort of regularize the labor market
over time.
To an extent.
By itself.
Leave it in the hands of demand and supply.
Let us just round off with Honorable Shehu Adelan. You've heard what our guests in Lagos have said. We just want you to wrap it up in a few seconds as per the way forward.
Well, thank you. If JAMB says 120 is the benchmark, and I apply to UNILAG as my first choice, and I score 120, now post-UME is not an automatic admission for people that will write it. It's just to use it to streamline people further. Then if I'm not able to sit for post-UTME in UNILAG, that's not a level playing field. So there are issues about this policy. Now, my take on this is that 120 is rather, no matter what, 120 is 30% of the mark, and that is F9. I think is rather ridiculous at this time that, out of school kids in Nigeria are the highest in the world. About 65 million of us are illiterate. If it's not going to be a deliberate attempt, in the hands of those who are governing us, to make sure that we are not educated, they should do something about it.
This new policy should be scrapped. Am I correct? Honorable.
No, I think.
I'm saying, in essence, you're saying that this new policy by JAMB should be scrapped. Okay.
Yeah, it should be scrapped or reviewed. It should be reviewed.
Thank you so much.
Honorable Shehu Adelan, thank you.
Dr. Obodo, just in a few seconds, just wrap it all up for us. Well,
access to higher education is a bit a complicated matter in the case of Nigeria. We do not necessarily lack the spaces we need to give access to every Nigerian child who wants to benefit from higher education. And the more people we let into the system, the better for us as a country. Because it has been proven scientifically that societies that have more people benefiting from quality higher education also tend to be societies that do well in various ramifications of society, economically, politically, socially, technologically. You can't do well in those areas where most people have not had access to it. That is not to say that every referral should be given opportunity to go to university. Given the investigation some of us have done, moving around the world, we have established that it is possible for virtually every Nigerian child who has the capacity to benefit from higher education to actually be given the opportunity to do so. We only need to consult those who have the data, and you discover that all this trouble we are going through, post-UTME and 120, all of those things will be a thing of the past. There are systems that will be technology-assisted, using quality manpower, and bringing together all the stakeholders to sit at the round table and applying appropriate communication strategy to educate everyone. And for example, we are leaving career service out of this. The average counselor in Nigeria is not playing the role he has been trained to play because the system hasn't given him the platform to do so. If you bring professional career service to the secondary school system, most of these challenges will no longer be there.
Well, many thanks, Dr. Obodo, for your input. We do appreciate it.
Joining us.
All right, that's been our show. You've heard from JAMB, you've heard from other stakeholders in Ibadan, of course here in Lagos. As per the way forward, it's they say it's not just about 120. Each university can actually go further than that if they want to. It's just actually to give everyone a level playing ground. My name is Justin Akadonye. Many thanks for watching.
Well, I do know that the education system in Nigeria does need to be fixed, and one policy cannot answer all the questions. I think we should